Leah Jones, and I am the Executive Director of Diversity, Wine, and Spirits, and I'm here to present to you Becoming the Change, how the WSET community can build DEI in the industry. And we have some lovely guests here. Well, I'm actually the guest, so I'm going to let Denise go first, and then and then I'll let Rob introduce himself. So, Denise.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so much for being the guest and the host all at the same time and introducing us to WSETers. If no one on this session knows, I am Denise Bourne, Account Development Manager for Americas East, but I'm also team lead for the Americas Diversity and Inclusion Action Group, which was formed as a part of a global initiative run by WSET Global. We started in July 2020. And I, along with 6 of my colleagues in the Americas Action Group, are working very diligently to promote and empower diversity, equity, and inclusion across the Americas region. And then I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, Rob McCackey, or at least seg to my colleague, Rob McCackey, who can introduce himself.
I sure can, Denise. Thank you, ladies. So I am Rob McCackey. I'm the Senior Commercial Development Manager for WSET Americas, and I'm excited to be here on this panel as it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I think it's something that, you know, we're all still navigating and learning as we go, and we're constantly just trying to do better, and this is part of that. It's an ongoing conversation and set of actions. So let's have some conversations.
So I'm really glad to be part of this series, and for all of you that are joining, thank you for joining us. I want to start off by giving a few definitions. And I've gone to webinars and seminars when they were live, and I've gone to different diversity and inclusion focused events. And I constantly hear different definitions, but I'm doing it again. I'm making sure that we're defining diversity and inclusion, equity and equality, because what's going on currently in the Americas, specifically outside of WSET, but just when you look at what's happening in the world, diversity is typically defined by race, ethnicity, or gender diversity. So if we go back to the very core and the very black and white definition, I think it will broaden our scope and kind of give us some structure on how we need to start thinking about diversity and inclusion the right way in order for us to start implementing initiatives and to be helpful to the community. So the first definition is diversity. And just, you can Google it, just black and white, just straightforward. Diversity is a diverse range of variety. And if you start thinking about diversity as a diverse range and a variety, then you will understand that we need to not just think about certain spectrums of diversity. Diversity is a whole spectrum. It is the LGBTQIA community. It is thinking about race and ethnicity. It's thinking about also equity and ableism, the disability community, ageism. It's talking about geographic diversity, all variety. And if we do that, it is opening an opportunity for us to not miss communities that have been marginalized and groups and people because we're only focused on gender, because we're only focused on race and ethnic diversity. So I just want people to keep in mind that it's a variety, it's diverse range. And then when we think about inclusion, we all hear the term DEI, DEI. What does that actually mean? There's a difference. You want diversity, you want to encourage diversity, you have this, so you get this diverse range of people or groups in your environment, in your space. Is your space inclusive? You know, inclusion is a completely different concept. Inclusion is talking about belongingness, feeling welcome in a space. It's getting a seat at the table and getting a plate and a fork and knife like everybody else. And so the hard and fast of inclusion is recognizing our differences by accepting and embracing them. It means you have this range. So we have to acknowledge that somebody that might be disabled going to this table, is the table high or low enough for, if they're in a wheelchair, for them to access that table, for them to feel comfortable there. And that brings me into equity versus equality. And I'm going to take a moment to share my screen because I think this is very important for us to realize. A lot of when we talk about diversity and inclusion, just on a whole scale, I know we focus on trying to make the environment equal, trying to create initiatives that promote equality, but we have to think about equity. And so one of the terms you will continue to hear moving forward as the world is open up to diversity and inclusion is DEI. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm going to just share my screen real quick. Oh, okay, there we go. There we go, you lovely people. And then here we have a graph, a diagram, where we're talking about in the first corner inequality. You see this tree, and that's the system. This is the world we live in. And this tree is just kind of like moving on to the edge. There's more apples on one side, and then you have someone on the other side of that tree, and there's fewer apples. So you have this one person, and if there's an abundance, there's resources, there's an abundance of apples, but it's unequal. It's not accessible. The person on the other side is on the other side. They don't have access to the other apples. They don't have access to opportunities. And then we think about, well, what is equality? It means that it's evenly distributed. So as you can see, the tree, there's still more resources on one side, but now you have two ladders and they're of equal size. They're on both sides of that tree, but one has it a little more easier than on the other side because that is how that system is built. They still do not have access to the resources that they need. They still can't reach the apples. And then we think about equity. Equity, custom tools that identify and address inequalities. So now you see the ladder has changed. We've addressed that it's not just about being equal, it's about handing those tools. Both sides of the tree now have ladders, but one is higher. It needs to be in order for you to have that access to the apples, to the resources, to the opportunities. And now a further scope, just a little bit, not off topic, because I really want to focus on diversity, inclusion, and equality for this session, but looking at justice. Justice, it kind of includes that inclusion. Inclusion, accepting our differences, embracing them, and creating a culture of inclusivity, creating a space where everyone is there and they feel good. So that tree is symbolic of that. You know, can we change the system, make it even? So on both sides, we can both have the same size ladders. We both have the same equality. We're not thinking about equity now. Now it is equal because that system is set up that everyone can have that opportunity. They can have the same opportunities. So going back to WSET, Wine, Spirit, and Education Trust, there have been a lot of initiatives that, you know, they're commendable, but they're also setting up best practices, not just within the organization, but for onlookers, anyone in the industry that kind of wants to see what are people doing? What can I do? There's a question of how do I get started? What can I do? What are my resources, and how do I get from point A to B? So with that being said, I do have a question that I want to ask, that I want to present in the poll about prioritizing. Now that you have a working knowledge of what diversity is, what inclusion is, and equity, I'd like to know, how do you prioritize that? What is more valuable to you currently right now? If you had to say, this is the most valuable thing for me as an APP provider within your space. What is important to you? So I think the question is up there. Which one is the most important to you? So diversity, inclusion, equity. Please feel free to join in on this poll so we can explore your answers and see where we're at as a community and together. So talking about these definitions is my segue to talk about some initiatives that Rob and Denise will go further discuss. So talking about how to be an ally and how to create safe spaces and diversity and inclusion, how do you get from A to B? One of the initiatives that Hawaiian Spirits and Education Trust is implementing is APP development programs and partnerships. And one of the initiatives is turning tables, and I'd like Rob to speak on that, and then I'm going to segue in after that.
Cool, thanks, Leah. So yeah, so I think allyship is something that I think a lot about, and it's something to me that I'm very conscious of being a middle-aged, middle-class, cis white guy who has been afforded opportunities, a lot of which have come to me because of how I talk and how I look. And I'm always very conscientious of trying not to do things either performatively or tokenistically. And I think even before we started our own internal initiatives, it had always been part of our mandate here in the Americas to try and support and uplift communities and groups and people working in this space. And the one thing I'm very aware of is that we are not experts on this. So we wanted to talk to people who were and find out how we could diversify the pool. And it really came down to me, the stark realization that we didn't have a lot of diversity within our educators and our APP ownership. And how could we address that? So we started talking to people and getting to know people, and they were letting us know about groups and initiatives, and Turning Tables was one of those initiatives that I kind of just really resonated with me. And they're based out of New Orleans, and it was started by a group of folks there who really wanted to provide opportunities within and without the hospitality community to provide externships and connect mentors and experts with people looking to just increase their skills and get some professional and personal development. And through that, they run these programs for 14 externs every year, offering mentorship and skills training and opportunities to take courses such as WSET courses. And that was part of it. And I also wanted to give them the opportunity to become an APP, to become a program provider, so that longer term, giving them the skills to be able to be self-sufficient was something that was really important. Quite often you see, we'll give a scholarship or we'll give away a course or an exam, and I think that's great and that's a start, but let's actually teach these people to be self-sufficient, and then they can pass it forward and keep moving. And I think that's something that was really important with Turning Tables. So we have some initiatives that we work with their externs for, and there's a lot of other partners involved in that who help provide some of the financial resources needed to give these folks access to our courses. Right now, the current group have just finished their level 1 spirits exam. Thanks to some partners, they've just about to be signed up for the level 2 spirits exam. Beyond that, we're providing some mentorship, some extra sessions. And then separately to that, we're identifying some of the key members of Turning Table and providing them the skills to become educators and ultimately an APP. And that's the end game. And hopefully Turning Tables, their aim is to be in other cities, in other markets, particularly in underserved markets and cities in the South primarily, focusing on those marginalized and underrepresented communities. Another part of this project is they have some phenomenal wine educators, bilingual speakers. So we're looking at how we can create more bilingual English, Spanish educators throughout the ecosystem as well. So that, again, people can start to see educators who look like them. So that gives them something to aspire to. So Turning Tables has just been a phenomenally rewarding project to be a part of and just help those guys and be that ally for them as they do the hard work.
I think that's super important because when we talk about, and a lot of this is focused on allyship, and whether that's you as an individual or as an organization, this portion of what you're doing in terms of allyship is actually looking at, the people that are in the space that are leaders and APP providers are leaders, and to make sure that the representation is there, that someone's walking into a classroom or into a web classroom, online classroom, and seeing educators that look like them. I think that's really impactful. And I want to go into the second initiative that you also are partnering with, Chocolate City's Best. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is something that came about, and this was founded by a young lady, a phenomenal woman, really hardworking hospitality professional who had been to many kind of trade shows, as we all do around the country, and just didn't see a lot of folks who looked like her, honestly speaking. And her name was Capri Robinson. And she decided that she's based out of DC, and there are a lot of black and brown bartenders and hospitality workers there who really weren't being represented at some of the big national and international shows. So she decided to set up an organization called Chocolate City's Best, providing resources, competitions, mentorship. And I, again, wanted to help them become an APP and provide them with the resources. So it started out just me helping her and her team go through some courses, and the eventual plan is to have them take our educator training program. From there, we were lucky enough to be able to provide some mentorship and support to 3 of their competition winners. It's actually on a call with them last night. They're currently working through their level 2 in spirits. And then there are other initiatives. So thanks to the support of other organizations, there are now scholarships lined up. So thanks to groups like Uncle Nearest and Jack Rose, based in DC, there are now scholarships to provide spirits education for young professionals from these underserved backgrounds. So what I've noticed as I start working with more of these projects is they're multifaceted, and it isn't just like an obligation. It isn't just that I feel like this is work or charity. This is really just smart business. You know, this is about business opportunities that exist that have been underutilized, and you know, there's massive communities in this country who we're not reaching, and that's potential revenue streams, that's potential reward, that's potential advocacy across whole new customer networks, which I think is just, it would be remiss if we didn't explore these opportunities.
Now, in terms of just partnerships and looking at this specific area, and again, representation, having people at the table that look like you, did you see outreach from people that were marginalized, and did WSET actually have people come and say, I want to be, I'm diverse, I don't see any representation, can I be part of the organization? How do I start? Where do I go? Is that something that was happening, or it was just the outreach?
There was absolutely, I mean, we were talking about this recently. Every day we get emails, I want to be an educator, I want to take the educator training program, I don't know where to start. And it was always kind of, okay, well, you know, who did you take courses with? Maybe take a course, maybe speak to an APP. And it was these kind of repetitive conversations that really kind of germinated within me and made me think, well, is there more than we can do? Can we be more active in this conversation? Is it enough to just kind of pass the buck, or do we need to actually say, look, let's actually connect some of these resources? And some of that is providing opportunities, some of that is holding some of our partners to account, some of that is just starting difficult conversations. And I think it is multifaceted. It's all of these things coming together, but there's definitely been a tidal wave building. And obviously the events of the last year across every aspect of our society have really sharpened minds and given people actually time to pause and think and really recognize some of these inequalities that are inherent in our systems that we can start to think about and take action towards fixing.
Thank you, Rob, for that insight. And I do have one more question, which is more, so is there any advice that you would give to a provider if they see any students or anyone that they think would be a good fit? Is there something that is there a system involved that APPs can provide or could suggest talent? And is that something that's something that should be thought about?
I think it's that's something that we internally should think about more, and perhaps consider how we could provide more avenues for people who do have questions, whether that's APPs or students, potential educators. But I also think, you know, if I had to put a call to action out there to our APPs, like, don't be scared of having difficult conversations. Don't be scared of not knowing stuff. Don't be scared of saying the wrong thing. You know, we're all in this together, and we're all better if we work together. So reach out to us, have conversations to us. If you're recognizing opportunities in your markets for us to do more, for you to do more, if you want to be a mentor, if you want to do something and you're not sure where to start, let's have a conversation. Let's start there. I think that's the best place to start. And let's try and give people a voice so that we can find out what people really need. Something that I've thought about a lot recently is, yes, there's scholarships and there's opportunities, but how do we make sure the people who most need those opportunities actually know where to go? Like, who's going to those websites? Who's exploring those opportunities? Are we getting into communities that really need them? Are we working with community colleges or community groups who have access to the most underserved communities? Do we need to reevaluate whether our tools are fit for purpose? You know, do we need to look at how we can upskill people in other ways to provide the springboard? I think there's so many facets to this that we have to be mindful, but we have to start. I think that for me is the biggest takeaway.
Have you guys seen the answers for the poll? I think this is very interesting. This actually makes me feel good, because we're not, again, we talk about diversity and inclusion, and so many people are just focused on diversity. I'm glad to see that there's a good evenly distribution, but inclusion and equity are at the forefront. And I think that's very important, that we're just looking at the grand scope of things. So I have some more questions that I'm going to be asking throughout the webinar. So please feel free to participate. And that's the next poll. Have you currently viewed diversity through solely the lens of either or both race and ethnic diversity and gender diversity? Or both? And again, it's broadening our scope. You know, we have to think of all spectrums. And going on to the next topic at hand is, again, the theme here is allyship, becoming the change, doing the work. And doing the work means educating yourself and educating your groups, and it means researching and establishing relationships. So some other initiatives, and Rob, you touched base on this. I'm going to pivot to Denise now to talk about what does that look like, the research and establishing the connections and fostering those relationships. What does that look like, that part of the process?
Well, there are so many facets to the research process. It is a tough topic or subject to get into, to learn about, to discuss. And it always starts with a small step. So there are Google searches. I mean, Google is everything. Obviously, we have to be mindful of where we're Googling and the source of the information. But Google works. Google is a great place to learn, as we did today, what's diversity, what's inclusion, what's equity. And then we start doing more Google searches. So we're looking at those organizations or initiatives that are doing the work, because I think sometimes we get afraid to get into spaces that are uncomfortable. And the thing is, you don't have to do all the work, but you need to do enough work to find out who are the people doing the work. So there are the chocolate cities, there are the turning tables, but there are other organizations such as the Verizon Project, which I happen to be a board member of, shameless plug. But there's also Wine Unify. There is, I mean, there's so many organizations there.
Don't go.
I almost went down the rabbit hole. I almost did, but there are a number of organizations.
Somebody didn't mention me. I'm going to stop you. Right
I know,
now.
right? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But there are a lot of organizations. Yes, a lot of them are in the US, but I would also say that there are so many organizations also available in Canada. And we're always looking for more information on who are these organizations in Mexico and Central America, in South America, in the Caribbean, which is one of my territories. But the beautiful thing is, you APPs, or you members of the APP community or the WSET community, you don't always have to do it all by yourself, because we, WSET Americas and the Americas Diversity and Inclusion Action Group, we do have the knowledge of who are these organizations, or initiatives that are doing the work in the communities, in these various territories within the Americas, and just reach out to us and say, hey, I'm in this particular area. I want to learn more about organizations who are doing work with regards to persons with disabilities, whether they're learning or visual or physical disabilities? Who can I get in touch with? How can I get involved? So use us as the resource, but also feel free to do some work as well, because the thing about this space is we cannot be lazy and we cannot be complacent. We all have to do the work. And as much as organizations reach out to us, we also do the research to find out who are the organizations, where are they, and we get deep down into it. Also, I want to mention that all you APPs, you exist in various communities. So you know who are the organizations in your communities, or where the spaces are within your communities, within your states, provinces, countries, territories that are doing the work, or ask some questions. Where are these organizations? Because they're there. So I think if we think about it as a community effort and not as I have to do all the work for myself, then we will make significant progress, sorry. So yeah, reach out to myself, Rob, any of the account development managers. If you feel that it's easier, reach out to Dave, and then he'll kind of trickle it down to the right person. But just always remember that we are all in this together, and we are willing to do the work, and we're willing to help you do the work. So just reach out to us.
Now, is there an actual, in-house strategy that was implemented? Because all these initiatives, it took time. And again, it's going from A to B. Is there any advice in terms of strategizing? So we now see in terms of value, what people are focused on, right? Diversity, inclusion, and equity. So if you can kind of segment, I'm focused more on inclusion or equity. I'm going to reach out to who? I mean, what does that strategy session look like, and what recommendations do you have?
So with our action group, one of the first things that we did with our meetings was identify what was it that we wanted to do and how were we going to go about doing it. So we actually have a 4-pronged structure, which speaks to, yes, and I know you mentioned it before, Leah, APP development or educator and APP development for those core communities that are marginalized and underrepresented. But then we're also doing a lot of work in finding out where do people exist. So Rob mentioned going into the community colleges, figuring out where are these people who are marginalized, underrepresented, finding out from early stages, is the wine and spirits industry something that you want to be in? Here are the tools. Here is how you do that. Because oftentimes people don't think about careers in wine and spirits. You kind of fall into it. But if we can reach out to these people at that critical stage where they're starting to think, well, what is it that I want to do with the rest of my life? Then it makes life easier for all of us, certainly for the APPs, certainly for WSET. We get the information out there. Our third prong, which is something we'll go into a bit later, is talking about just the diversity of it all. So giving access. How do we make sure that people know or can access WSET qualifications? Because let's be honest, I do have the privilege or lack of privilege, perceivably, as being a Black woman, but I'm also a middle class Black woman. So I have privilege. I've been able to pay for WSET level 2 awarding wines and level 3 awarding wines. There are not many people who can access that. And so what we want to do is give people a stepping stone and help them get to that stage. And then our 4th prong is about mentorship. And what that means is we oftentimes within our business development or commercial development and now account development, because we've just restructured. So we're a lot of things, but it's still all business development. Within our individual capacities, we are always in a space of providing mentorship to persons who are looking to become educators or who are interested in becoming APPs. And now we want to do even more, because before we were account or commercial development managers, we've had different experiences in the industry. I, again, with my privilege, used to own a wine import and distribution business in the Caribbean. There's a lot that I can share about what that looks like. How is it to become an importer and distributor? How do you manage your business? How do you do a great sales pitch? How do you get great traction into the industry, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a strategy for us because we know that these are the areas that are of greatest importance. And so we've tailored strategies on how we will achieve these goals. We're clearly doing the work already, because I mean, Rob mentioned 2 of the companies that are the initiatives that we're working with thus far. And so what we don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. We actually want to be the middleman for everyone. So we want everyone, whether it's the initiatives, the potential candidates, the APPs at which these potential candidates will be doing the qualifications at. We want everyone to come together, and we want to kind of be the middleman and say, hey, come to us and we'll redirect you in the right direction. We'll make sure that you know where to go and how to get there, or that we can give you at least some assistance in this is the next step. And then when all else fails, then there are people like you, Leah, Executive Director of Diversity in Food and Beverage, yes, formerly Diversity in Wine and Spirits. And so
rebranding to Diversity in Food and Beverage. We're still in Wine and Spirits phase right now.
Okay, so. That's okay. I'm going to give them a heads up. But
giving out the goods.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Right here, have you currently viewed diversity through solely the lens of either or both race, ethnic diversity, and gender diversity? And it's almost unanimous that it's both. And again, this is a space of learning, and it's a safe space. And this is why I ask these questions, because I'm saying what's thrown in front of us, generally speaking, when we're talking about just the timeline for diversity and inclusion, this is a new concept. This is a new field of study. It's something that happened, you really saw a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives in the early 70s, but it was focused towards women. So we started out in the the Americas, the USAs. If anybody from Canada hears that, I know that I'm going to get an email. Excuse me, the Americas. We love you, Canada, and everyone else. All right, so back to, I'm going to bring that back in. We started looking at gender, and then eventually we started looking at race and ethnicity. So in terms of your strategy, diversity makes sense also financially. And if you're focused on women and race and ethnicity, there's a whole spectrum of people out there that want to be educated, that want to be educators, and that want to spend money. Well, I don't know about that, but they have the money to spend on their education, and they also have the money to spend on products. But if they don't have the education, then it's like we're not setting them up for success. We're not giving them the tools, and we're not helping the industry tap into this talent pool and tap into different spectrums of diversity. And I think that's really important for us to start, like you said, Denise, thinking about reaching out to organizations that are geared towards the blind or the deaf community or disabled, and thinking about ageism. I am actually a diploma student. It'd be nice. I wouldn't mind seeing someone that was 75 years old taking the course with me, because what are we saying? We're saying there's a lot of young folks coming into this industry, and the people that tend to be educators are older. I love my OGs. You know what I mean? I love that. I would like to see that on the student side. I would embrace that, because there's probably coming from another industry. I have so much questions. It's a different way of looking at the program. And as a colleague in that class, and who I am and who they are, it's, again, thinking about shifting the culture and coming together and having these conversations and sharing the different experiences. So I think that's really interesting. I would like to talk about, I do have another question that I'm posting in a moment. I would like to talk more about your initiative, and let me just make sure that I say this right. It is the In the Caribbean Spirits Initiative. Yes? Denise, did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did. You got that right. Yes,
yeah.
You did. Thank you.
Let's discuss that a little bit, because I think that going back to excuse me for saying the USAs, the Americas, thinking about that is just that, thinking about the Americas and thinking who makes up this community. Are we reaching out to different countries, and how are we expanding and making sure that there's, again, access? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about this initiative. I think it's important.
So the In the Caribbean Spirits initiative really came out of a global set of initiatives that WSET had put in place. We started in the UK, by partnering with Pernod Ricard. And then we moved into Canada and we partnered with Corby Wine and Spirits. And as a person who is responsible for the Caribbean, notwithstanding that I do sound as though I've spent 29 out of my 38 years in the Caribbean, because I have, because my parents are from Barbados, I thought it was very important that we think about diversity of location as well. So we're talking about geographic diversity. And historically, when we think about the Americas, we're thinking about the USA, we're thinking about Canada, probably giving some love to Mexico. I know that Brazil is a big space for us in the APP community, but oftentimes we don't get to invest as much in the Caribbean. And so I reached out to the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association, and that is a body that has about, I think there are about 16 or 17 rum distilleries or spirits distilleries across the 34 countries or territories that make up the Caribbean. And I said, look, let's talk about doing something to empower those persons who work in the hospitality industry, who have been displaced because of COVID-19. And notably, tourism is one of the biggest industries in the Caribbean in terms of generating revenue. And so it was really important for me to kind of touch home base, or my second home base, as I call it, and to provide opportunities for people who oftentimes cannot easily access or do not have the finances to access WSET qualifications. And so we were able to co-sponsor 209 candidates across 14 Caribbean countries, islands, territories, just in case they fall into one of those classifications. And it was really great because what we did is, yes, we did level one award, the level one award in spirits, and we did it via the online classroom, but we also took the opportunity to supplement it with some additional resources and some additional conversations hosted by Rob McCarkey, the guy up there. Well, he's right next to me right there on my screen, but also Nicholas King, who is the product development manager for our spirits qualifications, notably the level 3 spirits qualification textbook. And so it was amazing. A lot of people have reached out to me subsequent and expressed their appreciation for having the opportunity to be in a space to interact with other people across the Caribbean, which is always amazing, to sit on a platform, have conversation, have Zoom sessions, see each other at varying points in time, but learn about spirits. Because, I mean, the Caribbean produces the perceived #1 spirit of the world, which is rum. And so it was good for them to learn more about rum, but also to learn about the other spirits that are, of commercial importance. And these are the kind of initiatives that make sense, but they also make a difference to people, because now it's not about, WSET, it's about yay people. We want to empower people. That is why WSET was established in 1969, to empower people who wanted to be a part of the alcohol beverage industry and give them the tools so that they all have equal footing as they go about doing the business of the business. There you go.
I'm gonna come in real quick, and I actually like to see the results for this next question, which was, do you think you have a problem with diversity? Which is interesting because this was a very straightforward question, and how everyone answered in the beginning. We also talked about inclusion and equity. But yes, when we think about diversity, just thinking about like, what is my problem? There's something that seems off. Is it diversity, or is it that it is diverse, but it's not inclusive? Maybe people don't feel, or a certain group doesn't feel heard, and you have grievances that you hear from one group because they're marginalized in this space. So it's interesting that, and because, this is a global community, I'm pretty sure that when you answer the question, you're looking at where you are and who is it representative of, your space. And I have another question that I'm going to launch in a moment, which should be fun. And I want to move on a little faster because there's a lot of content. There's a lot of things that you are doing as an organization. I really want to highlight that. I think I want to move a little bit closer to, again, focusing on allyship, is creating these partnerships, outreach. The partnerships are so important. I'd like to hear more about the Jack Rose Scholarship that you're involved in, Rob, if you can give us some information about that.
I mean, it can, but it was really driven by Capri and her team and the willingness of organizations to realize that they wanted to do more and could do more. And I think that's, you know, I have to give kudos to some of these larger restaurant groups, multinationals, large wine cooperatives who have actually kind of stepped up and said, look, we have funds, we know there's a problem, let's get involved and see if we can try and address it a little bit. So, I mean, in terms of what involvement I had in that, I just was I was the outcome. It was really her and her team who kind of did the work and, you know, connected the dots for us. And that's phenomenal for me to work for an organization that when people do get given funds to do stuff, they come to us. That's, you know, there's an obligation I feel that comes with that, but it's also hugely satisfying to realize that we have a product and a team and a set of qualifications that kind of go beyond some of our own biases and things that we kind of don't even think about. And you know, people aspire to it. And I think that in and of itself should tell us that we're the caretakers of this knowledge. We're not the owners of it. And we need to make sure that it's distributed as equitably as possible. And fortunately, there are other partners out there. I mean, we're a non-profit ourselves, a not-for-profit organization. We do not have bottomless pits of money. I wish we did, that we could support everything in-house. So we really, these key partners are vital for us to be able to cover our costs and get these initiatives off the ground. But what we do have is the human capital to be able to support and go above and beyond in terms of coaching and mentorship. It was really exciting to be a part of the Be the Change job fair a couple of months ago, and just that opportunity to sit down with people, new up and coming people in the industry, looking to break into the industry and just wanting to find out how and get advice and have someone they could talk to. And I feel like that's something that really costs us nothing but time as professionals in this industry, you know. And again, I think that's something that, you know, there's plenty of time where I just want to sit back and watch TV, but, you know, instead of doing that, let's spend 10 minutes and talk to some people and provide some guidance for some people. And it's so rewarding when you do it as well. And I think it really does cost nothing. But yeah, the Jack Rose initiative it's a new initiative. We're currently accepting applications for that. People can, I'm happy to share some links in the resources here, how people, if they are interested, want to share that information. And Chocolate City's Best, Capri and her team will be picking the candidates. There'll be 5 candidates to go through kind of a level 1-2 spirits accelerator program. And then we're going to support some of those individuals with giving them access to a level 3 spirits at the end of that program. So it's just a worthwhile endeavor, and we're creating the beverage industry leaders of the future, and that to me is exciting.
Oh, Leah, you're doing the mute. We just love it.
No, you missed what I just said. The whole thing.
Yes.
Okay.
The whole thing. I just love it because this is 2021 and we're still muting ourselves.
It's the whole 48 minutes, Leah. So if you could just start again, that'd be great.
I know better. You know, and it was right there. You know, I don't want you to hear the lawn mower in the background. So I do have another question. And so please excuse my Spanish because I try to translate it myself, and I didn't know how to translate APP providers. So you have to excuse me. I tried my best, but te conectas con otras APP providers donde en inglés es el segunda idioma in su region. So I'm not going to tell you what that means. If you don't speak Spanish, I'm going to have you do some work and try to figure that out. And I think that's important because I've done some webinars, and again, talking about diversity and inclusion. And if we're going to talk about wine, we have to also think about people that English is not their first language. We have to think about other people that are in this space, especially when we're talking about the Americas. It's so diverse. You know, we're hitting regions like Mexico and Central and South America. Definitely, we have to think about the wine industry and yes, migrants and Latinx. I think that's important. And again, talking about all spectrums, if we're just really focused on BIPOC or people of color, I think it's we overlook the Latinx community, and they're a big part of this. They're a big part of the wine community. It's just something that we don't need to tippy toe in. We need to start focusing on initiatives geared toward making everyone feel welcome. And I know we discussed offline that you are rolling out some material and working on trying to improve your material for other languages. I don't know who wants to take that question, Rob or Denise.
I'll jump in quickly and then let Rob finish. So yeah, one of the things that we are working on internally is understanding that, yes, we have been doing this for 51 years, but one of the things that we do well is update our qualifications, because we know we don't always get it perfectly correct all the time. And then things change in the industry, year by year. What we did notice and what was of great importance for us was making sure that the information that we have in our textbooks, yes, be factually correct at the time, but also be inclusive. And we've recognized that there is a need for us to be a bit more inclusive in the way that we deliver our curriculum, whether it is languaging, acknowledging the contributions of other societies or communities to the wine and spirits and sake, and soon to come beer, yes, sectors, but also realizing that sometimes our SAT doesn't always give as many terminologies or doesn't give as extensive a lexicon as it could. And I always use this as an example. As a person who has lived in the Caribbean, what I perceive to be mango is slightly different to what people in North America perceive to be mango aromas and flavors. Now, it's still the same mango, but I know what a ripe mango tastes and smells like if it's Caribbean hot or, grown in a warm to hot climate versus a not so warm climate. But then there are other fruits or other herbs, spices, etc., that are used across the world that we don't necessarily include into our SAT. And, we do need to consider these things. It wouldn't be everything that we could put in the lexicon, but what we're doing is we're making space for adjustments so that people can feel a bit more included when they're describing wine or when they're having conversations about wine, spirit, sake, and beer. Ooh, I just remembered them all. Thank you. Now, Rob, you can go.
I mean, it is a challenging thing to get right, because obviously there is a certain amount. It's thinking about how do we decolonize our language, but still maintaining a simple global vocabulary, and that's a fine line to walk sometimes, because everyone has different cultural reference points, different backgrounds, that they're going to be able to relate to things differently. So you need to have a set of tools that are as simple to execute across as many places as possible without marginalizing some of the people that you are teaching. And I think that's something that the team are really thinking about right now more than ever. And I commend our product development team, because it's a difficult job. And I think one project that I think of when we think of this is when we launched our level 3 spirits, and for the tasting exam, giving the internal assessor the ability to add certain vocabulary in that section that might be more relevant for their market, so that we wouldn't necessarily think of when we're writing the key. I think steps like that are a step in the right direction. And I think those are things that are always going to be challenging to get right, but just being mindful of them and cognizant of them, and doing our best to not have this kind of UK Eurocentric vocabulary whenever possible. I think it's something just to be conscious of as we become more and more global, as the UK and Europe and English speaking countries become a smaller piece of our pie and we expand into other languages and other markets. I think it's something that will become more and more relevant, and something that we'll have to continue to consider as we move forward, and rightly so.
Oh, and before I forget, because it just popped up, so thanks for that, Rob, because you stimulated the brain. I also wanted to be said in public that when we talk about making these adjustments to the curriculum or to our SAT, that we're not doing it in isolation. So we have reached out to varying people in the communities and asked for their insight, because we don't know what all the communities feel or what is necessary or what can be contributed. So I want to use this moment as a call to action to those who are in the session at the moment. or who will be watching this recording in the near future, if you do have some recommendations, some ideas on how we can improve the qualifications to make them more inclusive, please reach out to us and let us know that you have a willingness to work with us, or just send a quick email saying, well, can you please consider this as well? Because we always want you to feel as though your voice is important, because it is. We are here to serve you and our students, so please make sure that you give us as much feedback as possible. Thank you.
I think as well, if you in the D&I booth that we have here at the summit, there's a link there to a resource for people to leave their suggestions and comments. I believe there is a comment box. So that's absolutely the sort of place where you can leave your comment to suggest, have we thought about X, Y, Z? Perhaps we can include this. And I know that Vicky and Nick and the rest of the team in product development are very keen for people to give brutally frank and honest feedback there, because it will ultimately make them question why they do what they do and make them make better decisions.
I would like to go back to this poll. So the poll ended, we got results, and looking at the people that are attending and how many people are in the room and how many people answered previous questions, very few answered this question. And so the question is, I purposely put a question there that we have to think about, again, the bigger picture. Are we ready to do the work? Were you willing to go if you do not speak Spanish, if you did not understand this question? Were you willing to copy and paste as you're listening and figure out, I want to participate? What does this mean? How can I answer this? You have to think about yourself. Again, these little nuances on who you are and assessing where you might have a bias, or, well, like Rob said, sometimes, it's doing the work, but I would like to really watch TV. Bridgerton, whatever. But you have to be, that question was meant, actually not, it wasn't so much what it was, which was, are you connecting with other APP providers where English is a second language? Because this is a community and we need to be working together as a community, but you also need to be willing to do that work, go the extra step. If I don't know what this means, how can I participate? I can't participate if I don't know what this means. Do the work and find out what that means. So that's it was half and half, C and no. C is yes, and no is no. So the next question that we also posted, are you partnering with outside organizations to attract diverse students? And so let's see the results for that. Yes. It is majority is saying that yes, there is outreach that has been started, that they're outreaching to other organizations, and that's very important. If you do not, one of the things that I say, if leadership is busy, have that conversation, reach out to WSET. Are there any resources that I can find time, some space? I have all these things going on. I want to prioritize it, but I don't know how to do that. Reach out and use your resources. And maybe if you have a forum, for example, getting students involved is also definitely a resource. I know as a student, I've had discussions with other APP providers. I don't stick to one. I move around because I actually live in Belize and I have to go to the US to take my test. So it doesn't really matter what state I go to. But I've created the relationships with APPs as well as students. And we have these discussions. And as students, we also are here as a resource. If there's a space for us to go and ask questions and make suggestions, that's very helpful. And it's something that I implore APPs to provide a space. I've also volunteered as well as a student, and that might be an opportunity for a student to volunteer to get actively involved in your initiatives. And moving a little bit along because we only have 1 minute left. I would have liked to. I knew this. All these initiatives.
Who'd have thought we'd overrun, Leah? Who'd have thought?
I knew it. I was trying to bring us in. I knew it. I had a timer right here and everything. Again, going back to the question number 2, and to just wrap it up, we also have to do the work ourselves. We also have to think about maybe our implicit bias. Go research, how can I find out if I have implicit bias? Reach out to WSET if you need help or resources. Go to the diversity and inclusion booth in the lobby. These are things and steps you can take to be allies and to show people that you care, that you're listening, you're ready to learn, and if you make a mistake, you're ready to do the work to make sure that you learn from that mistake. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Denise. I really appreciate the time that we spent together, and I always appreciate these moments. If anyone has any questions, again, reach out. And if you want to know more about diversity in wine and spirits, I'm Leah at diversityinwineandspirits.org, and I'm here to assist as well. And thank you for attending. I hope this was very helpful.
I just want to mention very quickly that there are a couple questions that we weren't able to tackle during the session, but we can certainly provide answers after the session or outside of the session. So please look out for an email from us. I would just ask Kimberly, our marketing amazingness in WSET Americas, to just record the questions so that we can reach out after today's session. But thank you so much, Leah, for leading such an informative session. Thank you, Rob, for being you in this session, which is also very informative. And thank you, all of you who have attended the session. I hope that it was informative. Again, call to action. Please reach out to us if you need any assistance, if you want some more information, if you want to have further discussion. We are here to serve. So thank you.
Yeah, and Karen, Vanessa, Sylvia, we will absolutely make sure we follow up with you and your questions. We're sorry that we talk too much.
Yeah, but that's why we work at WSET, because we talk too much and we talk well.
This whole group collectively talks a lot when we get together. That's just what it is.
Yeah, we had a 10-minute pregame last night that lasted like 3 hours. So that's this is actually on time for us. So
yeah, this was great, and again, thank you so much for having me on this platform.
Great. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Kim, in the background, Devin, all her team, Chloe, Amy. Thank you all for attending. Really hope you're enjoying this summit. I'm really excited that we get to have these conversations, and long may they continue. Thank you.
Hear, hear. There's